between Sodom and Madonna, blurring binaries in My Fair Nanny. In their article about My Fair Nanny, Stephen Hutchings and Natalia Rulyova write that the sitcom functions across several cultural thresholds: high-low, artifice-authenticity, center-periphery, male-female, Russian-American, that are in the process of redefinition in contemporary Russian culture. These thresholds create tensions from which comedy develops, as well as allow for reflection and commentary on cultural norms. Yuri Lotman and Boris Uspensky have convincingly contended that Russian culture follows an underlying binary logic of opposition in which individuals and groups conceptualize social life in terms of a set of absolute alternatives that admit no compromise. Either one or the other must be chosen. Likewise, Russian cultural historian Mikhail Epstein has claimed that Russia's entire culture lacks, quote, middle ground between the ideal of Sodom and the ideal of the Madonna. What is needed, he argues, is a concept of a third neutral zone in the public sphere, between the ideas of heaven and hell. We argue that My Fair Nanny creates such a third space, where binary oppositions dissolve temporarily, and that the show's female protagonist, Vika, serves as an agent who establishes and expands the negotiated public sphere in the diegesis of the show. In his discussion of the film genre and its relationship to the rise of the modern public sphere, Rick Altman proposes that visual genres are the key vehicles forming a bourgeois public sphere. Visual genres, including sitcoms, dismantle sacred languages and replace them with the language of reason, by replacing the concentric societies characteristic of monarchies with the secular society counterposed to the state. Finally, in place of consistent pattern of communication between center and periphery, there must arise a new mode of regular interaction among those who were once considered a periphery. We contend that Vika establishes this third space of the public sphere, 1, spatially in Chatalin's apartment, 2, in terms of gender roles, and 3, in terms of class relations. Our presentation will focus on analysis of the sitcom's representation of and challenges to traditional Russian cultural binarisms. We claim that sitcom conventions allow the conflicts that emerge from these challenges to be rehearsed and resolved within the show. The non-serious genre thus allows for a negotiation of issues that are in flux in Russian society. The structure of Chatalin's apartment presents a physical embodiment of the rigidity of binaries. The space is hierarchical, with the patriarchal office on the top floor and the feminine kitchen on the bottom. Prior to Vika's arrival, family members inhabit strictly delineated spaces. The children live in their rooms, the periphery, while the patriarch, Maxim Viktorovich, sits in his office, the center. When she is hired as the nanny, Vika comes to dominate the center of the first floor, the living room, which, as William Douglas notes, is traditionally seen in sitcoms as a male space, where the father relaxes after work. In this case, Vika upsets two binaries at once. First, she challenges Chatalin's dominance of this typically male area, making it her own. Second, she works to break down the center-periphery dichotomy, bringing everyone together in the living room and making it the center of home life and the space of cultural negotiation. Vika's Soviet-Ukrainian tribal identity, she has dozens of close friends and relatives who invade the apartment, stands in stark opposition to the new individualism of the Moscow elite represented by the Chatalin family. Vika's requisitioning of the living room enables her to integrate some of the old Soviet tropes of commonality with the newfound individualism and atomism present at the Chatalins. In one episode, when Vika's friends come to visit, the children come screaming through the living room as Denise chases his sister with a toy sword. Vika notes with some embarrassment and pride that before her arrival, they did not even speak to one another, implying that she has brought them out of their individual worlds to the communal and carnivalistic one of the living room. The creation of communal space within the new Moscow represents a blurring of seemingly opposite poles, introducing the notion of a common ground essential for a bourgeois public sphere. Vika's childhood home is a stereotypically Soviet apartment, replete with broken furniture and a garish color scheme. This space acts as a representation of the past as well as a touchstone, linking the show to the audience's own lives through memories of their Soviet-era experiences, allowing them to better identify with Vika. The apartment also acts as a reflection of the Soviet mentality, which is embodied by Vika's mother, Lyubov. Unlike Maxim and Lyubov, Vika is at home in both spaces, with Lyubov so firmly planted in the Soviet past, and Maxim Viktorovich and the Chatalin family existing in the new Russia. Vika alone bridges the Soviet past and the post-Soviet present, creating a middle ground as a means of resolving the differences between the two conceptions of Russia. Vika confronts the norms of patriarchy and tradition, not only in the living room, but also in Maxim Viktorovich's office, the apartment seat of patriarchy, often bursting in demanding they change her decision or address some issue that she deems important, disrupting the established class and gender hierarchy. These brazen intrusions into his professional sphere deconstruct premises held to be sacrosanct and contribute to the creation of the bourgeois public sphere, free from the restrictions that societal binaries put upon interactions. For example, in the second episode of the series, Vika insists that Masha, the eldest daughter, be allowed to go on her first date. Chantal reluctantly agrees, but turns the tables on Vika, requiring her to chaperone them. Although this shows how Vika transcends societal binaries, ultimately Maxim Viktorovich asserts his control, preserving the normative structure of the household. The boundary crossing that Vika gleefully instigates within the Chantal household remains confined to the domestic sphere. When Vika volunteers to direct Ksyusha's school play, she is immediately replaced by the authoritative Maxim Viktorovich. Vika only returns to play a traditionally female role of comforting Ksyusha and encouraging her to stay in the play after her father's directing zeal goes too far. This is a far cry from her usual boisterous behavior within the house. As a result, the audience receives the message that within a home, social transgressions and experimentation may be acceptable, as long as in public the norm, as expressed through binaries, is maintained. The private space of the home allows an inversion of the accepted order, as long as it does not spill out into the larger society. The public-private binary remains inviolable. Vika's negotiating skills are especially apparent when the viewers observe her in action next to her mother. If Vika creates the third, secular, transitional space for debate and deliberation of class and gender relations, her mother upsets the established hierarchies and preserves the binaries. She is what Catherine Rowe calls the unruly woman, a big, funny, noisy, old, and rebellious character, radically unsettling social hierarchies. In My Fair Nanny, the mother dominates the scenes in which she appears, with her height, the bright colors of her clothing, and her booming voice. For example, in Episode 2, Season 1, she appears in a dress with a picture of a flaming dragon on the front to meet Chantal's butler, Konstantin Nikolaevich. Lubov is much taller than the butler, and the makers of the show do everything to emphasize the contrast in height between the two characters. Lubov inverts the traditional gender hierarchy by leading the conversation and touching him. She repeatedly pushes Konstantin down onto the couch while calling him a neroyashka, or weeble, and essentially transforming a very proper man into her boy toy. In episode 49, Lubov brandishes a cucumber and chases Vika around the room with it, eventually breaking it across the head of Maxim and then devouring it. An unruly and powerful woman, Lubov dominates the scene and inverts gender roles, castrating Maxim by devouring the phallic cucumber. However, though the unruly woman is central to the comic aspect of My Fair Nanny, Lubov is not the main character of the series because of the ambiguity that such a character creates. The audience does not respond as well to Lubov as it does to Vika, a lighter version of the unruly woman. Kathleen Rowe notes that through the power she derives from her liminality, the unruly woman's associations with boundaries and taboo evoke not only delight, but disgust and fear. In My Fair Nanny, Lubov is consistently returned to her proper position in the invocation of class.
Немножко иначе устроен. Вика, а можно свидетельницей? Легко. Правда, я сказала, что я таки должна подумать. Подумать? Мама? Зайка, это ты что ли дразнишься, а? Это я, серый волк. Вот сейчас я встану и начну чистить мозги тебе. Я тебя кормила, я тебя рожала, я тебя ростила. А ты мне тут кулики будешь строить. Ну, что с тобой? Это нападение все же не дает спокойствия. Ну, что ты голову подняла, Марьяна? Я...
Если наставление фотографии, надо или прошлом выстреле.
Он бы еще и заикаться начал. Ой, Тоня, я хочу, чтобы ты была счастлива. Да я и так счастлива. Да? Это значит, я глухая, да? И ты не говорила, что должна подумать, да? Так это ж я специально, для Максима. Ты же он не сразу переживала. А Димасику я сразу сказала. Да. Ты сказала ему «да»? А то. Родственники. Можешь поздравить молодых.
Правильно. В таком деле спешить не надо. Надо все обдумать, взвесить.
Vika's less extreme exhibitions of unruly behavior create a compromise for the viewers of My Fair Nanny, and thus allow her to be the master negotiator and maintain this new third space. Vika's untamed nature is signaled, for example, by her wardrobe. She is typically dressed in pants, some even with prominently displayed balls as a decorative motif. In the end, Vika is only partially empowered, since she depends financially on her employer, Maxime. Though she can challenge him on domestic issues, she does not intrude into his professional sphere, which would be too great an affront to his masculinity. The female audience of My Fair Nanny expressed a strong, consistent desire for Vika to resolve her tenuous position through marriage. While this desire and its eventual satisfaction by the narrative does not cancel out Vika's challenges to social norms, the ideal of romantic love is a more traditional model of female behavior. This anticipation of a marriage finale for Vika is in stark contrast to the unruly character of Lubov, who devoured her husband. We never see or hear him. Konstantin acts as a comic double for Vika. He is associated most often with oven mitts, feather dusters, aprons, and other feminine household accessories. If gender is, as Anne Kaplan claims, a prevailing cultural sign system that involves subjects repeating gender signs as constitutive of a specific identity, then Konstantin is associated with traditional female signs. If Vika is portrayed as a woman with symbolic balls, then Konstantin is a man with symbolic breasts. He feeds the family, cleans up after them, and gossips with Vika. Because these two characters invert their gender roles instead of assimilating, they work together to mock the assimilationist character in My Fair Nanny, Jana. Maxime's business partner, Jana, adopts masculine traits in order to succeed in the business world. Her power suits and complete indifference toward the Chantalan children, matched with her ambition and independence, serve to create a semi-threatening character. She is generally the butt of jokes made by Vika and Konstantin, and is depicted as the perfect stereotype of a power-hungry female, with no capacity for compassion. In this sense, Jana both buys into patriarchy by adopting a masculine mode of behavior, and challenges the patriarchal order in a very tangible way. While her assimilationist egotism is ridiculed for comic effect, her ambitions are undercut with the logic of patriarchy. Her character is meant as some kind of warning to real women not to aim so high. Vika serves as a transitional character between her mother and Jana. She does not try to invert the female-male binary entirely, but neither does she simply assimilate herself. In this way, she expands the third place in the public sphere without becoming a threatening character. While still acknowledging the patriarchal dominance present in Russian society, she establishes a place for limited and acceptable female empowerment. Vika's position as a transitional figure does not just apply to gender roles and binaries. It also carries over to class distinctions. Class conflict in My Fair Nanny is not represented through the traditional binary of upper versus lower class. Rather, it exists as a temporal conflict between the society of the past and the emerging modern society. Vika and Lubov represent what is old and Soviet, excessively so. They are a comic exaggeration. Maxim Chantalan and his life and family situation are similarly an exaggeration of the common perception of the new Russians. Comedic exaggeration is a tool of introducing and successfully resolving the class conflict. The Chantalan household is a combination of the very modern and the archaic. While the familiarity between Maxim Viktorovich and Konstantin Nikolaevich seems more acceptable than the familiarity between Vika and Maxim Viktorovich because of their shared gender and sophisticated tastes, in reality, it goes against the normative hierarchical relationship of the butler and head of household. Despite the fact that Russian society is no longer familiar with these systems, knowledge of their constraints remains. The humor that it provides, however, is of a different tone than the American version of The Nanny. The idea of a Russian man cleaning someone else's house, or even his own, is foreign. When Konstantin introduces himself as the Chantalan Dvoretsky, Lubov's assumptions that he is a handyman or dvornik is indicative of this class disconnect. Vika acts as a mediator, clarifying to her mother Constantine's job, that he is a butler, a position that holds esteem and class significance, not just a janitor or handyman. Within the temporal class binary, Vika and Lubov are more familiar figures, and thus invite the sympathy of the viewers. The audience identifies with Vika first out of necessity. In the Châtelain household, there is very little which is familiar, although much which is aspired to. And second, because she represents a bridge between the two classes. In the Prukhovskaya household, everything is familiar, if undesirable. Vika, therefore, becomes the touchstone of change for the viewers, connecting them to the world of the show as she connects the past with the future. Her mother's overly Soviet attitudes and the alienation caused by their nationalities are not sufficient to paint Vika as a representative of her mother's class. Rather, according to Hutchings and Rulyova, these characteristics actually serve to endear her to the audience. She combines these with a desire for social mobility, which allows her access to the world of the Châtelains, the new Russians, without losing herself. On one level, Vika's creation of a third space between the opposing ends of centuries-old binaries creates comedy. The inversion of the expected allows the audience to laugh at a challenge to the accepted norms. However, it also provides a way of establishing a more robust public sphere, which in turn encapsulates a more sophisticated and complete picture of society. By bringing aspects of Russia's past and present to interact in a limited sitcom location, and asserting herself as a strong woman without assimilating entirely into a man's world, Vika expands the bourgeois public sphere, breaking down the walls put up by binaries. One must remain mindful, however, that these challenges to the fundamentals of the system exist only in tightly controlled moments. My Fair Nanny does not endorse a rejection of accepted values, but rather provides an opportunity to poke fun at them, while still recognizing their primacy in the social order. Thank you.